Hey everybody, this is Niquee and you're listening to Get Lit PH Podcast, the show that makes your brain flow. Now that we're all here and we're live, I want all of you to fasten your seatbelts because now is the time to get lit. Hey, it's your girl Niquee with you. We're back with our 43rd episode of Get Lit, a show where a group of friends just kick back, relax, and discuss some awesome literature. We're here for you every Tuesday of the week, except last week since we were all busy, but we're definitely back for more. Today I have two very special guests who, through literature, would like to share a revelation they had about a certain story in the Philippine literature, which they quote, would really want to share, unquote, right before the Philippine national elections. Hey, you guys!
Hey guys, I am Julian Carl Eugenio. I'm a graduating student of the College of Liberal Arts in De La Salle University, Manila. I'm a literature enthusiast, and I have a very important message I'd like to share with you guys regarding something me and Mr. Mao discovered while reading through different pieces of Filipino literature in our studies.
Hello, guys. So before we dive into what we discovered, Julian, I'd like to introduce myself for a bit. I am Mr. Mao, a third year student from the College of Liberal Arts as well in De La Salle University. I consider myself a bookworm and a literature fanatic as well. I am very pleased to join you guys today. And yes, as Julian mentioned, we are very excited to share our thoughts on what we discovered on the different readings. So yeah, guys, I'm looking forward to our very lit discussion.
Now, dear listeners, I got you this week with a totally new topic. Previously, we've been able to discuss the horrors behind the Hiligaynon urban legend of Maria Labo. Following that theme, today we're going to be talking about our very own Diwata and how she eventually became the story of the Virgin Mary in the Philippines. In other words, as this is the only show I know that makes your brain flow, we'll be studying a case in Philippine literature where we see the gradual shift from animism to Catholicism based on the folk legend, Ang Alamat ng Lansones, to the modern satirical retelling of the Lady of the Blessed Fruit. Today, my goals for all of us are to educate our audience about how different retellings of the same story show how foreign influence is present in the modern retellings of our traditional literature, to reveal how literature can be manipulated into becoming a means to control people through a change of the story's narrative, and to remind people to always fact check information to become aware of when propaganda is present.
That's true. That's very true. And if any students, teachers, or people who are interested in literature and how it influences how the modern Filipino is today, then this episode is for you.
Well, I am definitely interested and excited, Julian. But wait, I'm actually curious. What topics are we tackling for today?
Oh, I haven't told you yet. By the way, our flow for today, we will be covering first an essay by Rasil Mojares on the history of the Virgin of Guadalupe in Cebu. We're going to be talking about a folk story called Ang Alamat ng Lansones and its different retellings. We're also going to be talking about the implications of these retellings on literature and the purpose they served within their time period. And finally, connections these findings may have to modern times, especially during the election. All right. Are you guys ready? How are you guys doing
Yep.
today? So far, so far.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing well, naman. I'm just a bit tired from I just finished class earlier, but it's
Mhm.
okay. It's still time to get lit.
Grab it. Working really hard, nama, our students.
Yep.
Anyways, so let's get started. Julian, thank you for being here. By the way, aren't you from Cebu? How religious would you say the city is? Are there any traditions you guys follow over there?
Yes, I am from Cebu. So, Cebu is actually the oldest city in the Philippines. It was the first place the Spanish landed on April 7th, 1521, so it would make sense that it would also be the first place where Christianity would spread in the Philippines. So, we have festivals like Sinulog that celebrate Señor Santo Niño or the Child Jesus. And the story goes that an image of the child Jesus was said to be the baptismal gift of the Portuguese conquistador Ferdinand Magellan that he gave to Hara Amihan of Cebu, which is now called Cebu, in April 1521. Now, the image is believed to be miraculous. It is housed at Basilica Minore del Santo Niño in downtown Cebu City. So, just a little background on what Cebu is. On I guess it's related to our topic today. So yeah, that would be it.
Okay, so knowing this story, and based on the fact that you are from Cebu, have you read Rasil Mojares' essay, Stalking the Virgin, the genealogy of the Cebuano Virgin of Guadalupe?
Yeah,
What
I
do you think
do.
about it?
Yeah, I do know a lot about it. In fact, it's quite similar to the story I just talked about. From my readings, the story of the Virgin of Guadalupe came about when five Augustinian men who accompanied Miguel Lopez de Legazpi and his soldiers in an expedition fled to the mountains and hid in a village called Taguan. Um, in relation to what that place is called now, I believe it's now called Tabuan. It's near the town of San Nicolas. But going back to the story, these five priests converted the populace and then gave them a gift of the image of the Virgin Mary as a symbol of the amity in which the villagers received them. So, and after that, a series of miracles supposedly happened, and when the village was raided, supposedly by either by Moros, Spaniards, or bandits, they hid the image in a cave to avoid it from getting profaned. And when the image was lost, it was found again, except underground when a man was digging the earth and was able to see that it was there. It was inside the earth. So he then presented this image to a parish priest in San Nicolas, um, who said, "Okay, this is authentic." And ever since that time, both the cave and also the church became a shrine, like a religious melting pot where devotees and pilgrims just like came and interacted with the town and its miracles. But what people don't know is that before Guadalupe became religious in 1874, it was actually full of animists. For those people listening who don't know what that is, animists are people who believe in gods or spiritual entities existing in all objects of the universe. So, for example, they could have made the sun their gods, the trees, the air, whatever. Guadalupe was also described to be full of vagabonds, bandits, and rebels, and interestingly enough, suddenly became religious towards the end of the 19th century. Remember when I said that five Augustinian men gave the image of the Virgin Mary to those villagers? Okay, backtrack. That supposedly happened in 1565. If we really follow the timeline when Miguel Lopez de Legazpi landed, so why did the people of Guadalupe suddenly believe the story that the image of the Virgin Mary showed up from the ground when the difference between the image moving from the cave to the church is 300 years? It doesn't make sense until you really try to find out that there is incentive for the Spanish in spreading this story.
You know, that's really interesting. What do you think the purpose of this was?
Well, the purpose was, I mean, we see it all the time in history. Like that famous saying, history is written by the victors. In this case, the Spanish needed a way to control those bandits and animists in Guadalupe. In one particular case, in 1898, when the Cebuano Katipuneros assembled in Guadalupe to stage their revolt. According to Mujares' essay, there were animist idols and symbols that were left behind when they were getting ready to enter the city of Cebu. And the earliest account of the cave being a religious shrine was in 1904, when the Americans came and invaded. Now, I'm not an expert in history, but that's a huge gap in time between when the image was left in a cave in 1565 or so and in 1904 when it was known to be a shrine. I believe that the citizens of Guadalupe were made to believe the story by the Spanish in order to unify them not only under one Spanish flag but also to one religion. This story influenced Filipinos at the time that miracles could only occur if you believed in Christ and the Virgin Mary. Some of the stories of these miracles spread, such as healing of the sick and using the water in the cave as medicine. I mean, it spread like wildfire to the point people in Guadalupe were parading an image of the Virgin Mary around the town in 1903, claimed that doing so was the reason why the cholera epidemic disappeared. If that's not effective propaganda, then I don't know what is. The Spanish totally knew that what they were doing.
You know, that story definitely rings a bell. This reminds me of the story called Ang Alamat ng Lansones. Have you heard of it? It's the one that generally follows that certain trees bearing round and brown fruits are known by the people to be poisonous or containing lason, which they completely try to avoid, obviously. But eventually, towards the ends of the stories, they end up consuming the supposedly poisonous fruit.
Yeah, Nikki, I've actually read that story multiple times already, and I've also seen various retellings of it. And I noticed the same thing you did. It just seems odd to me as to why, despite the legend saying that the fruit is very poisonous, the characters that convince them to eat the fruit seem to keep changing. It's been one of the things, Julie, remember, that have kept
Yeah.
us going crazy for months.
Yeah, and it seems to be related to the story of how the Spanish influenced our narratives, our literature, just like Mojaras's essay.
Yeah, I see, I see. Well, one retelling of the Alamatang Lanzones story I know is the one by Amy Lablanco, which follows a pregnant Edna craving for lanzones, but her husband refuses to get some of these fruits for her because, they're poisonous. But a bright light comes from nowhere as the husband is trying to reach up and get the lanzones, and this angel appears and tells him that touches the fruit, pinches it, and tells him that it's okay that he eats it. It won't be poisonous anymore. Now, this female figure in this particular retelling seems to remove the poisonous from the fruit, as I said, and I'd like to point out that in this story, there was a mention of churches. Tell me, have you guys noticed any differences between the various retellings of the Alamat ng Lanzones?
Oh, yeah. I know that story. In fact, there are so many other retellings of the Alamat de Lanzones that we can talk about. Uh, Although my favorite one is a book published by Lampara Books, and based on my perspective, this was the original story. This was the original unedited, uninfluenced story of how Filipinos or how this folk tale emerged. So it was when one day this old woman visited this barangay called Luna in an unspecified province in the Philippines, and made a hill full of forbidden trees her home. This hill was forbidden because apparently the trees on it were full of dead dewatas, or fairies that were sent by Bathala, their god, to save the people of the hill from hunger. These fairies didn't want to help the people because they wanted the hill for themselves. I believe the story goes that the fairies were so in love with the view of the hill that they they just neglected the people and left them there to die. So Bathala punished them and made them trees. So the Dewatas turned into trees that grew poisonous fruit. Regardless, the old lady who was told that story still decided that this was where she was going to live. And from there, she would trek back to the barangay, and she would more or less uh, encounter like dangerous encounters. Like she would walk back, and then there was a snake. But then what would happen is there would be a villager from the town who would save her. And one day she was walking back, and then she was trying to fetch water from the well. She would stumble inside the well, and then someone else would save her. And this would come into full circle when one day a strong typhoon would hit um, Barangay Luna, and people would be forced to leave their homes, leave their food, and go up this forbidden hill. And everyone knows it's all poisonous, okay? So people were starving, people were dying, and they asked what they could do because they can't go down. Of course, it's flooded. So what the old woman did, she reached out. She reached out to one of the forbidden trees and she ate the fruit of the lanzones or the lasones, and people saw that it was not poisonous anymore. So by miracle or by sheer luck, she ate more. She ate more lasones, and then people were convinced that it was not poisonous. Moral of the story is they survived. The people survived as a result of what she did, and people tried looking for her, but she was missing. And ever since that, ever since that occurrence, um, the people spread the seeds of Lansones. So it went from Lasones to Lansones because it was no longer poisonous, and uh, people thought that it was Bathala who sent that old lady to help them out. So yeah, that's just one of the various retellings that I would like to share with you guys. Um, yeah,
Yeah, Julian, this is actually a very interesting story, and it's really important to note because, on one hand, Nikki's story had mention of a bright light in the form of a woman, or let's say an angel in the context of churches in the story, and we have another retelling where there was mention of diwatas and whatnot. So there's an obvious shift in between these two pieces of literature in terms of influence, and it could have been for the same reason we thought of previously with Muharis' story of how the Virgin of Guadalupe came about. And this is also proof of a turn in the cultural and religious lens in Philippine history when the Spaniards started changing traditional folk stories into ones that fit their narrative more in order to get us to believe what they believed in.
You know, that's super interesting that you say that. Are you telling me that you believe that there are some similarities with Rasil Mohares' essay Stalking the Virgin with retellings of the Alamat ng Lansones?
I mean, there's definitely a shift in the narrative. Okay, we can see the Spanish influence with how the characters change in the main story. So, right, we had that old lady and the villagers, and now you had Edna and Manuel, and also this bright light. So, okay, let's take for example the writings of Dean S. Franzler in 1921. So, this guy, he was able to take an account of the retelling of the story of Ang Alamat na Lanzones by Manuel Halego, a Filipino statesman, educator, lawyer, and diplomat. He served as congressman of the first district of Nueva Ecija, who then heard the story from a farmer in Lubang, La Laguna. And the story goes, he said that hundreds of years ago, when Luzon was apparently uninhabited, Bathala created human beings, but not food for them. So Bathala asked for advice from Diwata, the supreme god of the universe. Diwata told Bathala that he sent an angel to the earth with seeds to be planted. The promise was um, that Luzon would be full of trees and shrubs and eventually full of humans. Um, and then Bathala, after doing this, made Adam and Eve. So you can see where Spanish influences hops in, right? So they were forbidden to eat the green fruit of a certain plant. They disobeyed and ate it anyway. So as punishment, they were poisoned and made very sick. They did not die, but as a result of their experience, they named the fruit lason or poison. Adam and Eve then asked for forgiveness from Diwata, but I mean, Diwata and Bathal forgave them, but they did. The gods were not able to remove the poison from the fruit. So in order to remove it, they had to send like an angel or something like a messenger to remove it, this poison, and then eventually the name from Lason would become Lanzon. So you can see the similarities, but then you can also see how animist views or animist tradition is blended in with Christianity's ideology. So, I mean, it's pretty evident in our.
Yeah, that's crazy. This blatantly shows how Spanish colonization had a vast influence on the culture and religion of the Philippines, to the point that a farmer was taught a retelling of his story, including both animist and Christian ideology in 1921.
Yeah,
And I think that's kind of sad too, because they've been able to shift that narrative. Like the Spaniards were able to shift that narrative over 333 years. Like imagine how much more of the Filipino culture we've actually lost. Like how many of these native Filipinos, how many of their voices were not heard, things like that. Especially after hearing the various post-colonial and pre-colonial Spanish versions of the stories Ang Alamat ng Lansones, I think it's really evident how the Diwata's depiction in Philippine literature changed after the coming of the Spaniards. And I read these papers once. Now, one from Quiros in 2019, where he mentioned how the Spaniards were able to alter Filipino consciousness in preparation for religious conversion by translating Christian themes of Spanish to the Philippine native language, which can also be noticed in the way how famous Philippine dewatas have the name Maria in them, like Maria Makiling, Maria Sinukuan, Maria Cacao, which Clark in 2016 explains is a Hispanicized evolution of the alternate name for the Diwata. So that's that. But I'm genuinely curious. What do you guys think? Why do you guys think it's important to analyze these different retellings of the same story?
Okay, I believe it's important because we're able to clearly see when and where propaganda enters and exits. We're able to see who the culprits are and what they want us to believe. We're able to take more than one perspective of one story and determine what's true and what's false from there. I believe we become critical thinkers by doing this.
Well, for me, despite the similarities of the context of the stories, I noticed that each one carried distinct meanings or had their own messages that they wanted to convey to the readers. And in the case of the governing Spanish that ruled over the Philippines for centuries, they managed to manipulate our literature to control our beliefs and discipline our people using religion. I mean, okay, take for example The Lady of the Blessed Fruit, published by Occult's Razor. It's a book on supposedly the seven virgin visitations that takes a spin on the story Alang Alamat ng Lansones by setting a modern schoolgirl's bullying experience as a chance to stumble upon the Virgin Mary under a Lanzones tree. Okay, if people were to take this beautifully worded short story without the context of its author and its purpose, people would be referencing it as an actual Marian visitation that had occurred. The publisher Occult Razor described themselves as a repository for questionable artifacts and invented ephemera, and for good reason. It's easy to cause chaos to create a pool of disinformation in a world where one viral post can fit your own or someone else's narrative. And what was the best way to pass that on in the past, other than stories you kept passing on from generation to generation?
I agree with that. And picking up from our discussion, I think we all totally agree that the Spaniards weaponized revisionism to their advantage to get more of the native Filipinos under their control and baptized into Christianity. A tactic which I believe is still pretty relevant in today's day and age. But before we end, how are we guys doing? We just scraped the edge of a dark topic. Did we get out what we wanted to, or you have more things to say?
Well, yeah, sure. I'd like to wrap up our thoughts by saying that different retellings of the same story show how narratives can change through the course of time to benefit those that successfully manipulate it. We should be aware of these things because they ultimately shape how we think as individuals. And in the context of this year's elections, minimize the effects of propaganda and disinformation in our lives.
Yeah, Julian, it's a good thing you brought that up because in the context of the coming Philippine elections, it's important to understand all the different perspectives of the candidates that we have. Some of them have narratives or histories that some people like to hide behind false information in order to make them look better, and some also have narratives that like to smear someone else's legitimate record of service. It's these things we needed to watch out for back then, and what we need to continue to look out even today. I know this is quite trite, but the heavily misquoted George Santayana once said that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Who, by the way, happens to be a Spaniard.
And that signals the end of today's podcast. Thank you, Julian, Nico. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you can unbuckle your seatbelts as this wonderful ride has come to an end. Remember, we're here to get lit with you every Tuesday of the week. So see us next week as we tackle another surprising take on Philippine myths. This is your girl, Nikki, with you.
I'm Julian.
And I'm Nico.
Don't forget to do your own research, say no to revisionism, and catch us next week. This has been Get Lit PH, the only show I know that makes your brain flow. See you guys!
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.